Yeah,
Oh, okay.
it's just me and her. Like we're in a separate apartment.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
MashaAllah.
yeah. The family's in the other place.
Like, is it a big family? Are there a lot of people?
We're on air now. Jabber, we can talk about it later.
Oh, what? Oh, really? By the way, you're live, right? Don't forget.
My what?
You're live.
My life?
Live. Live.
I'm live. Yeah, that's what I'm saying.
Oh, okay, yeah. Okay. Why are you live?
Because I'm about to start the study.
Oh, okay. Okay, brother. Okay. So are you streaming now?
Yes, yes,
Oh,
yes.
so okay. Then we can start, inshallah.
Yeah.
Okay,
Assalamu
okay, no
alaikum,
problem.
everyone. Welcome to another Quran study. God willing, today we'll be reading from um, Surah 52, verse 42. Let's all seek refuge in God from Satan the rejected. A'udhu billahi minash shaitanir rajim. Bismillahir rahmanir rahim. Are they plotting and scheming? The disbelievers scheme backfire against them. Do they have another God besides God? God be glorified, far above having partners. When they see masses falling from the sky, they will say, piled clouds. Disregard them until they meet the day that in which they are struck. On that day, their schemes will not protect them, nor will they be helped. Those who transgress suffer retribution here, but most of them do not know. You shall steadfastly persevere in carrying out your Lord's command. You are in our eyes, and glorify and praise your Lord when you get up. Also during the night, glorify him, and at dawn as the stars fade away. So, subhanAllah, I mean, these verses are referring to the retribution that awaits the disbelievers. And recently we came across actually some really interesting signs regarding this retribution that God is talking about here, and I believe um, this is referring to masses falling from the sky, right? And it could be referring to the smoke, and it says, when they see this, they will think that it's piled clouds. Um, but God says that disregard them until the day in which they are struck. Now, God says, on that day their schemes will not protect them, nor will they be helped. And it says, those who transgress suffer the retribution here, but most of them do not know. So it's not referring to the retribution in the hereafter, but it's referring to the retribution in this life. As we know, you know, from learning about the previous communities that God talks about in the Quran, when the messengers come to these people, I mean, eventually, they get their time to enough time actually, to ponder upon the message, look around. This obviously, include people that need to spend time to understand. Like it may take some people some time, so it's not. It doesn't make sense for the retribution to come like right away, but it does come very soon. After they have received the message, and we understand that the mathematical miracle of the Quran was given to this generation in 1974. The messenger of the covenant came, and not too long ago, the message was delivered. Now we have people that are mocking and ridiculing the messenger. As I recently came across a comment from someone on YouTube that was ridiculing the idea that the messenger of the covenant uh, mentioned that he had a feeling that it was going to happen in 1990, and the fact that it didn't happen, they use it as a way to promote doubt and ridicule his messengership, and call names and stuff, and insult the messenger of the covenant over it. uh, and the religion. But we know that it's bound to happen. We have verses in the Quran that talk about this prophecy, and we have God's mathematical signs. And He clearly said that He didn't know exactly when it was going to happen, but He had a feeling. So technically, He just had a feeling. He didn't claim to know uh, that it was going to happen at that time. So it's perfectly fine. It was a test for people. Obviously, the people who have doubt that they're going to use it to say, look, he said it's going to happen and it didn't happen. But we know that he said he wasn't sure about it, right? So which makes it all good. If he said he was sure about it and it didn't happen, like you had some false messengers recently that predicted kept predicting earthquakes like every year and it didn't happen. So that's a completely different story, right? And but we know that the messenger has clearly stated, and the Quran shows to us by looking at these examples, that it doesn't take too long after the messenger comes that you see the retribution comes, right? And so, given the fact that the messenger of covenant has has delivered his message completely over the course of the time that he was on this planet. Now people have had enough time to look at the message. The message has propagated in different languages all over the world, all across the internet, in every corner of the globe, and there are submitters in every corner of the globe that have also, personally given messages to people. People have had a chance to look at a lot of the videos and Quranic studies from the messenger, and the translation of the Quran, has been fully accessible to everybody. So the time is coming closer very quickly, for this prophecy to come to pass, and eventually, we will witness this not too far from now. That this is God's system, and His system is not going to change, and eventually this is going to annihilate the Arabs, as we know, because they're the biggest enemies of God's message and the miracle, and they have done everything they could in their power to, conceal the miracle and promote falsehood all over the world. Um, and so God says, they will suffer the retribution here. And then also verse 48 and 49, God is telling us to steadfastly persevere in carrying out God's commandments. Says, you are in our eyes, and glorify and praise your Lord when you get up. So God is always watching us. God is keeping an eye on us and looking after us at the same time. So if we commemorate God and if we remember God, God will look after us. God will take care of us. And what is required of us is to commemorate Him, to remember Him. And so we're being asked and reminded in these verses to glorify and praise a God when we get up in the morning, and also at night, glorify God, and at dawn when the stars fade away. So these are all the different ways and means, excuses for us. Of course, you can glorify God anytime, but these just give us, more excuses that God tells us specifically to glorify God at these times, right? I mean, you can glorify God at any time, but let's say if you're not glorifying God at this time, you're clearly disregarding and ignoring God's commands, if you think about it, right? So we are required as submitters to follow the Quran, to follow God's commands, His advice for us. Obviously, He wants the best for all of us, and so it's in our best interest, for our own good and for our own salvation and our own happiness, that we glorify God at these times as well as other times. God willing, I'll continue reading Surah 53, the stars, Al-Najm. In the name of God, most gracious, most merciful. As the stars fell away, your friend Muhammad was not astray, nor was he deceived, nor was he speaking out of a personal desire. It was divine inspiration, dictated by the most powerful, possessor of all authority, from his highest point, at the highest horizon. He drew nearer by moving down until he became as close as possible. He then revealed to his servant what was to be revealed. The mind never made up what it saw. Are you doubting what he saw? He saw him in another descent at the ultimate point where the eternal paradise is located. The whole place was overwhelmed. The eyes did not waver nor go blind. He saw great signs of his Lord. And the footnote says for 53 1 through 18, it says, Muhammad was summoned to the highest universe to receive this Quran into his heart. The stars fell away as he traveled through them at millions of times the speed of light. Subsequently, the Quran was gradually released to his memory. Please see Appendix 28. So, as the footnote states, Muhammad was taken to the highest universe to receive this Quran into his heart, and he traveled millions of times the speed of light. Obviously, because if you look at the books of Hadith, they say that he traveled and this horse-like creature with wings at the speed of light. So obviously, he would still be now if he was traveling. The Messenger of the Covenant explains that he would still be stuck in the Milky Way if he was traveling at the speed of light, let alone the, highest universe. And that is just, simple mathematics. So we understand that this is what it meant, and that as the stars fell away, he traveled because if he's traveling this fast, all of these things, I'm not a physicist, right? But if you're traveling this fast through time, um, all of this matter will become fluid as you travel through it. Because you're going into so fast, and you're traveling through time basically, and it's going to change, all the dynamics of, your existence and everything else around it. So it's only possible by God. Obviously, nobody else can do that. And so this was a sign from God, and a test for people that Muhammad was given this as a part of his messengership, because people have to accept this now. These extraordinary occurrences that happen with these people, that people had to believe them, and this becomes a test for people. Similarly with the Messenger of the Covenant, this became a test, and many hypocrites were exposed because they did not believe, or were disappointed by the explanation given by the Messenger of the Covenant about this and other things, because it was not really what they had expected it to be, or they thought it would be like, for whatever reason. But this is a sign that, this is why it's saying that the mind never made up what it saw. Are you doubting what he saw? So there are people that accepted, that accepted this, but they're still doubting it, right? And God says, we understand, at least as submitters, that we should not have any slight amount of doubt in this, that it's because it's possible for God, number one, and number two, it's all mathematically confirmed, right? So we understand that this actually happened, and Muhammad was given the Quran on the night of destiny. He traveled a millions of times the speed of light, and the Quran was placed into his heart. And this Quran then was revealed slowly into his memory over a period of 23 years as we know it, right? But it was given to him all at once. And so he was taken to, as close as he could go, where the paradise was located, right? So, God says he saw great signs of his Lord, obviously. So this is a blessing from God that, he allowed this to happen, and this is as a result of that, we have the Quran now. So it's just a blessing, not just for him, but a blessing for all humanity, that, God allowed this to take place, and now we have the Quran, which is also, proven by God with the mathematical miracle, where we have absolutely no doubt that this happened. So God will now continue reading verse 19, the flimsy idols. Compare this with the female idols, Alat and Al-Uzza, and Manat, the third one. Do you have sons while he has these as daughters? What a disgraceful distribution. What a disgraceful distribution. These are but names you made up, you and your forefathers. God never authorized such a blasphemy. They follow conjecture and personal desire when the true guidance has come to them herein from their Lord. So these are the two idols, female idols that the people had ascribed to God as his daughters, right? And they worshipped it. And God says these are nothing more than names that God never authorized. I mean, of course, associating anything with God, any partner that's next to God is a blasphemy. It's idol worship, right? But idol worship doesn't have to be idols that are statues. You know, they could be people, they could be your spouses, they could be your children, they could be your business, your job. You know, whatever it is that's more dear to you than God, and you think about it more than you think about God. You know, you think about it. Majority of your day becomes your God, right? So, but in this case, it's talking about these flimsy idols that were created by people with their own hands, and they name them names. I mean, people have, no problem believing that these idols that don't move and can't talk and can't help them in any way, people have no problem believing that these things are real, right? But here you have a messenger of God that actually went through all of this extraordinary experiences and received a book that is so perfect, and still people are doubting and not accepting it, right? But subhanallah, this is God telling us that, if you compare this to these flimsy idols, these statues that people make with their own hands. I mean, can they take you even to your neighbor's house? They can't do anything, right? But God has the power to take you in a blink of an eye, or even less, to the highest universe. That's his power, and he gave him the Quran, and he, gave it to him as a sign for people, also for people's heart's assurances as well. So God will now continue reading verse 24. It says, "What is it that the human being desires? To God belongs the hereafter, both the hereafter and this world. Not even the angels in heaven possess authority to intercede. The only ones permitted by God are those who act in accordance with his will and his approval. Those who disbelieve in the hereafter have given the angels feminine names. They had no knowledge about this, they only conjectured. Conjecture is no substitute for the truth." So, one, we're being told that, if people want things in this world or in the hereafter, whatever they want, God has both of them, right? So why don't they turn to God and worship him? Because he has everything they want, right? So it just makes perfect sense that you're just going to turn to God because he's your creator. He's the source of all provisions, everything is controlled by him. So you should turn to God. And then verse 26 is referring to intercession, the concept of intercession, that people have this common trick that, Satan dupes people into believing and make him make them hellbound by tricking them into believing that someone other than God can help them by telling God to take them out of hell or not take them to hell, just by them telling God what to do, right? So it doesn't befit God that someone else has the authority to tell God who he should put in heaven or hell, right? We know that God is the only sovereign, true king, and he's the one who's our judge. He's the one who decides who goes to heaven and who goes to hell, right? So it's not up to a messenger or anyone or a person who has memorized the Quran, or someone who has performed Hajj or any of this nonsense that we hear about on a daily basis on this ridiculous books of Hadith, that will take people out of hell and bring them into heaven just because someone tells God that this person should be placed in hell, like as if God doesn't know any better, right? God truly knows who deserves to go to heaven and who deserves to go to hell. No one has the right or the authority to tell God who goes to hell or who goes to heaven, right? This whole idea that someone else can tell God, whether it's Jesus or Muhammad or Ali or saints or anyone for that matter, can tell God who goes to heaven or hell, is a blasphemy. It's idol worship, and people who promote these ideas are definitely idol worshippers. And this is nothing, this totally against the Quran, right? But yet these people, they know the Quran by heart and they've seen these verses. So God is saying not even the angels, like forget about Muhammad and Jesus, angels who never doubted God's absolute authority, who are glorifying God, day and night, they don't even have the authority. They are, guarding hell, for example, and heaven, and doing all these duties that God has given them, and they don't even have the authority. So why would people think that a human being, another human being like Muhammad or anyone else, will be at some kind of a rank with God to tell him, like it's like, you have a president, and then you have, let's say, the gatekeeper, or not even a gatekeeper, let's say a janitor, because he's a low-ranking servant. Let's say you say like the janitor can decide how to run the company. He can tell the president. It's impossible. I mean, it's not, and that's not even a fair comparison. Because there's no comparison with God. I mean, He's the creator of all human beings. He's the one who created, everything, and then you're expecting another tiny human being that's going to tell God, no, this person, you put him in hell. No, he is mine. Let me tell you, as if God doesn't know. Let me tell you, this person worshiped me. He just came and he told me, so I'm telling you now to take him out of hell and put him into heaven. And God is going to do that, right? This is the whole idea is absurd and ridiculous. And so we know that intercession only works in scenarios where someone's already deserving to go to paradise. And so in that case, you don't even have to intercede for them. They're already going to heaven, right? It's like, uh, it's like, I already am approved. Let's say, I go for get a visa and already have a visa, and then you go and you tell the counselor, no, give him a visa. It's like, yeah, I already gave him a visa. He already has a visa. Or someone who's denied a visa, and then you go and you tell a person, no, he should get the visa or something like that. Well, it's probably not a good example, right? But the idea is that he's already deserving to go to paradise. So if someone deserving to go to paradise, doesn't matter what you say about this person, no force on earth can stop this person from going to paradise. Um, Same with a person who's going to hell. If someone's hellbound, someone's committing all these sins, hurting people, doing, cheating, illicit gains, all these things, committing adultery, aggressing on earth, all these things that these people do, um, for example, committing idol worship. So clearly, these people are going to go to hell. And it doesn't matter if Muhammad, Jesus, Ali, all the saints, all of these people combined together, beg God to take them into heaven. He can't. They can't. They don't have the power, and nobody tells God what to do, right? So, because that's what makes God the king, right? When you have someone who has the authority to do whatever he wants, nobody questions him, nobody tells him what to do. So this is a big blasphemy, as we know, but it's so prevalent, right? I mean, we wouldn't even have to talk about it if this wasn't happening. In the by the millions, people are committing this and believing in this on a daily basis. You go around, I mean, people say it so casually that Jesus has died for your sin. You believe in Jesus, you're gonna go to heaven. And people tell you, no, if you say you're Muhammad's follower, God is going to take you to paradise. Muhammad is going to intercede on your behalf. Well, God says in the Quran, Muhammad couldn't even intercede on behalf of his own uncle, right? He's going to hell. His own relatives, right? Noah could not intercede on behalf of his own son or his wife. Neither could Lot. So why would people believe that someone that you don't even personally know is even going to do that for you and be successful in doing so, right? It doesn't make sense. And if you look at the Quran consistently, there's no basis for that whatsoever. As God says, they have no knowledge about this, they only conjecture. Conjecture is no substitute for the truth. Verse 29, choose your friends carefully. You shall disregard those who turn away from our message and become preoccupied with this worldly life. This is the extent of their knowledge. Your Lord is fully aware of those who strayed away from his path, and he's fully aware of those who are guided. To God belongs everything in the heavens and everything on earth. He will requite those who commit evil for their works and will reward the righteous for their righteousness. They avoid gross sins and transgressions except for minor offenses. Your Lord's forgiveness is immense. He has been fully aware of you since He initiated you from the earth and while you were embryos in your mother's bellies. Therefore, do not exalt yourselves. He is fully aware of the righteous. So, very important verses. Here, verse 29 specifically, the subtitle says, choose your friends carefully, right? People have to remember that they have to choose their friends carefully. It's very clearly stated in the Quran that we must choose our friends carefully. And the reason for that is that, when you don't choose your friends carefully, it affects you because whoever you befriend, is ultimately going to influence you. Whoever you spend time with is ultimately going to influence you. We as human beings are creatures that are made this way. And you may think you're a very strong believer, okay, which God willing you are, but doesn't matter how strong you are. This is human nature, right? That if you are spending time with whoever, those qualities, those things are eventually gonna become part of you without you even knowing it. They become a part of you. And people who go against that obviously will have to pay the price. People can say that, God is the one who guides me and God is the one who looks after me, and it doesn't matter who I befriend. I will be guided if God wills. Yes, God wills, but God has a system. So if you're not listening to what God is saying, you don't expect God to help you, right? If you are putting your finger in the fire yourself, don't expect the fire to be cool for you in that case, right? God created the fire. It's his law. If you put your finger in it, it's going to burn. So likewise, God says there are good people and there's bad people. If you mix with the bad people, you're going to become like them. So don't mix with them. Don't spend time with them. Don't be around them. Try to force yourself to be with the believers instead, right? But if you're not going to listen to God, then obviously God is not going to guide you either, right? So this is pretty straightforward. And yet we see that, people are more resistant to this commandment, than anything else. And they use many excuses, actually, to befriend these people because they like them, they are not, because people are not sincere towards God, they are apathetic and they don't care that if a person's an enemy of God, but because they like the person, and the thing is, if you really believe in God, you love God the most, you will not be able to stand to be around people who don't love God, who are against God in some way. No, just because the person's nice to you, you decide to be friends with them. You decide to be kind to them and love them, even if they're against God, even if they're God's enemies. So there's nothing wrong, to be clear, in befriending people who don't oppose you because of religion, who don't go against you, who don't fight the believers, right? Because they're in a position where they haven't made a choice, right? When someone makes a choice and has made a decision, a conclusion, to be against God, then at that point they're God's enemies, right? But a person who has not made a decision yet is a person that can be at some point become a believer, right? But things like mocking and ridiculing and fighting, these are all signs, right? These are all the symptoms of the issue for which God says that, you can befriend them, right? But if you're not seeing the exact same symptom, like let's say, someone says, well, this person is not fighting me, so I can befriend him because God says those who fight you, right? But they might be fighting other people who believe the same way just because they're your uncle or your brother. They're not fighting you, but they're going and fighting other people. But they don't care if they're fighting other people as long as they're not fighting them, you know. And then they say, well, um, God talks about enemies. I mean, heard so many uh, twisted explanations about like excuses or ways that people try to navigate, and bypass, you know, this thing. But the thing is, you cannot trick God, right? I mean, people fool themselves when they try to go against God in this way, right? They think that they're trying to outsmart God. I mean, there's no such thing, right? You have the commandments, they're straightforward. If you want to be guided, just follow them, don't make justifications in your head to bypass God's laws because it's going to ultimately affect you. And so God is very clear that you don't befriend people with whom God is angry. Don't befriend people who are hopelessly stuck in disbelief. Don't befriend the hypocrites. Don't befriend people who are absorbed in this worldly life, right? So generally speaking, the law says you can befriend people who don't fight you because of religion, because they're open-minded people like your coworkers, your friends, your neighbors, etc. But the moment they looked at the evidence and they decided that they're not going to follow it, they're going to be against it, they're God's enemies, right? And so you have to take a step and make that decision, make that evaluation based on your knowledge about the person. If you feel that they're never going to accept the message, you have zero hope for them, then they're not your friends. Don't consider them friends because you're prohibited from befriending such people. And I think we have talked a lot about them. We talk about it a lot, right? But still, you see people that, I mean, people are going to do whatever they're going to do, right? But God is reminding us that we shouldn't be doing that. Verse 30, this is the extent of their knowledge. Your Lord is fully aware of those who strayed away from his path, and he's fully aware of those who are guided. To God belongs everything in the heavens and everything on earth. He will requite those who are evil and who he will requite those who commit evil for their works and reward the righteous for their righteousness. Because God is watching, right? He knows everything everybody is doing. And but God says the righteous people are not the same as these people, I mean, um, obviously these people are going to have to pay the price. And God is talking about the righteous people. I mean, how they avoid gross sins and transgressions because they reverence God. Even when God says they're alone in their privacy, and God says He overlooks many of our sins. Right? I mean, we think that we're so righteous, right? But God knows us, and He knows that He knows us, as it says, when we were embryos in your mother's bellies. He knows us when we were embryos in our mother's bellies, right? We don't even know how we were like when we were embryos. Like God knows us more than we do. So God says, do not exalt yourselves. He's fully aware of the righteous. So people, and this reminds me, like there's people who like to exalt themselves, and I mean this is really, I mean, egotistical, obviously, um, as we know, and it's very wrong because I mean we're like, if we were so righteous, really, I mean, we wouldn't be here in the first place, right? We're here as the messenger of the covenant says, halfway to hell, right? We're halfway to hell, and we are rebels who didn't make a stand with God and ended up here now, didn't take the chance to repent when the opportunity was given to us. Now we're here and we're halfway to hell. And here people are exalting themselves. I'm a believer. I'm a sincere person. I mean, people say with their own mouths, right? And they don't realize, I mean, what's wrong with doing so, right? I mean, people should be humble, and obviously people need to realize that they're not as righteous as they want to think or they want people to think, because God already knows uh, how righteous or unrighteous we are. You don't even, and even if you are so righteous, let's say, you don't have to tell anybody. You don't have to tell God you're so righteous or other people. It's for, it's between you and God. And if God sees you're righteous, you're gonna get your credit. It's not like you have to declare it like you're like you have to declare, to IRS, for example, like this is how much money you made, so, or this is you did this and did that, so that you're gonna get deductions or something, right? There's no point in doing that, other than trying to show off in front of people and show how righteous you are to gain people's trust or whatever it is. There's nothing, there's no reason for people to do that. Excuse me. Verse 34, rarely did he give to charity and then very little. Did he possess knowledge of the future? Could he see it? Was he not informed of the teachings in the scripture of Moses? Just want to look at the time, I hope. Okay. And Abraham who fulfilled? No soul bears the sins of another soul. Every human being is responsible for his own works, and everyone's work will be shown. Then they will be paid fully for such works. To your Lord is the final destiny. He's the one who makes you laugh or cry. He's the one who controls death and life. So specifically, these verses are reminding us to give to charity, because people who don't believe in God, God says they give to charity, but rarely. And then even when they do give, they give very little. So we shouldn't be like that, because we understand that the charity that we're giving is one, it's for our good, right? Excuse me. It's an investment that we're making for our own post-retirement account with God, and it's going to be multiplied manifold. God says this is the best investment we can do. We get the biggest return on our investment. There's nothing in this world that is anywhere close to something like that, because it's eternal. And and God says, did he not possess knowledge of the future? I mean, did he possess knowledge of the future? Could he see it? Was he not informed of the teachings in the scripture of Moses and Abraham who fulfilled? So these teachings that God is referring to here is the same teachings that are given here in the Quran as well, which is, understanding, our goals, and understanding the nature of this test, and understanding why we're here. So we have to observe the commandments. We have to be charitable, and I think God says that we love human beings. They love material things excessively, and so we have to, get out of that. The more we give, I think the more it helps us to detach from, the love of the worldly things. People love material things, as God says, right? And even, although like some people may love, some things more than others, we all have this thing, like we'll find there's certain things that we love, but they're all material things, and we tend to love them excessively. That's just the human being, right? So we have to get out of that by giving to charity and by investing into our hereafter. I mean, we want to believe in the hereafter. It will strengthen our faith and our belief in the hereafter when we are, fully invested in it, right? Literally invested in it. You'll know you have something to look forward to, and it will, strengthen your own faith, and it will grow your soul. By that, you'll also get more certainty. But we have to remember that these people that God is talking about, they gave to charity rarely, and then when they did give, they gave charity very little, right? So the devil will try to push people to the extremes, and in this case, he's trying to push people to the other extreme for most people, which is to give very little to charity because they love material things and money excessively. But then we have to be aware of the other end also, which is not to give to charity excessively either, because God says those people are unappreciative. So we have to find the balance. We have to give in moderation, even when we give to charity, even when we spend in the cause of God, right? Like we have all these ridiculous hadiths about like Muhammad and not sorry Muhammad, Ali and Abu Bakr and stuff. Like I think Ali gave half of his money, and then Abu Bakr gave all of his money, or the other way around, you know. And God doesn't want that. You know, God says we should be charitable without neglecting our share in this world, and we should give in moderation. And so this will encourage others to do the same. You know, God doesn't wish to make religion difficult for us, and He says He doesn't ask us for money to the extent of creating a hardship for us. So we shouldn't think that way. And then the other verses like 43 and 44 are also good reminders where God is telling us that He's the one who makes us laugh or cry. You know, in other verses, God talks about He's the one who makes us poor or rich. And 44 says He's the one who controls death and life. So God basically is reminding us that He controls everything. You know, whether it comes to being joyful or sad or miserable or happy, you know, God controls all of that. He controls our health, wealth, and happiness. Everything in this world is being controlled only by God. And we must recognize that in order to know God, and we must keep that in mind as we go on in our daily life, so that we are more reverent towards God, because nobody wants to be in a position where they want to cry rather than laugh, or they want to be miserable rather than happy, or be have poor health, etc. Right? So we all want to be happy in life in general, but obviously that's not the reason to worship God. The reason to worship God is because we understand that He's the creator of the universe. He's our Lord and Master, and that's why we worship Him. But He gives us all these things as a result. But we have to recognize that He's the one who controls all these things, and He's the only one. Even if we ask God for these things, I mean, that's also counted as part of our worship towards God. Verse 45: the husband determines the baby's gender. He's the one who created the two kinds, male and female, from a tiny drop of semen. He will effect the recreation. He's the one who makes you rich or poor. He is the Lord of the galaxies. He's the one who annihilated ancient Ad and wiped out Thamud. Also, the people of Noah before that, they were evil transgressors. The evil communities of Sodom and Gomorrah were the lowliest. So, very interesting, verse 45, it says the subtitle, the husband determines the baby's gender. So, if you look at verse 45 and 46, it's referring to the fact that from a tiny drop of semen, He created the two kinds, male or female. So it's not talking about the women, it's talking about the sperm from the man. So clearly pointing to the male counterpart, deciding the baby's gender. As up until very recently, even people in most countries, they would always blame the woman. For example, if they didn't have a son, people who were biased towards having sons rather than daughters would often divorce their wives if they didn't give them a son, right? but based on the Quran and based on the recent, proven scientific, knowledge that we have now, we understand that it's, the chromosomes, whether it's decides to be male or female. I mean, that is determined by how it comes from the male, right? And then it just goes and fertilizes the female. So the female does not have any role in deciding the baby's gender. It comes strictly from the male side, right? But eventually, obviously, God is the one who makes that decision, right? Even the man, it's not in his control to decide whether he wants a boy or a girl, when when they're going to be pregnant. And so this information is present in the Quran 1400 years ago, right? And so, for example, when it comes to like the three stages of the development of the fetus, like people say no, no, but like people among the Arabs, they had certain knowledge about the fetus and all that, right? But how would you explain this part, right? I mean, they didn't have this knowledge. I mean, there's obviously so many other proofs, right? But this is just one of them. Just adds to the list of scientific knowledge that we see that is present in the Quran, which is another proof that the Quran is authored by no one other than God, and there's no nonsense in the Quran. I mean, imagine if the Quran said otherwise. People would obviously, have a field day, mocking and ridiculing the Quran. But obviously, they talk about other things. They don't talk about all the scientific facts that are present in the Quran that confirm modern scientific findings. Um, so, God willing, and then, just one last thing. So, it also last couple of verses referring to, the communities that were annihilated. There's Ad, Thamud, people of Noah, and Sodom and Gomorrah, the people of Lot. All these communities are mentioned that these are the ones that God annihilated, right? And so this is just a warning that God has given us that He has annihilated these communities, and uh, um, I mean, eventually this is they're gonna see the retribution just like the previous messengers. The retribution is gonna come again, and yes, they are. God says, "Are they laughing instead of crying?" I mean, yes. You see people laughing and ridiculing the message and the prophecy itself too, and but eventually, it will come to pass, and then people will realize, as always, but it'll be too late for these people. So with this, God willing, I'll end. And if you guys have any questions or comments, please feel free. Thank you. And sorry, I went a little over time. If anyone has any comments or questions, please feel free.
Assalamu alaikum.
Welcome.
Can you just, I missed the first part of the talk. What was, which verses exactly,
So we
starting
read
from
from
two?
Surah 53, verse 24. No, sorry, 52, verse 42.
52, verse 42.
Yeah, up until
That's it. Yeah,
53, 53.
53, 53. Okay, well. Thanks. Yeah, and um, uh, you've made the right choice by changing the time to earlier time.
Thank you,
I
brother.
guess it will suit most of us, I guess,
Yeah,
because Pacific time might be okay for the US and people in
that's
that
right.
region, but
That's right. Yeah, and there's not
others.
a lot of people on the Pacific time zone, anyways.
Yeah, I know you have Eastern time, ET, I think, over there.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah, that's okay. Thanks, bro. MashaAllah.
Was it finished,
You're
brother?
welcome. Yes, we just finished
Oh,
reading the
okay.
verses.
MashaAllah.
So,
Yeah, but I wanted to ask you, like the verses you have read about, and the things that you told, God, of course, decides who goes to hell and who goes to heaven, and it's actually predetermined as well, right? Like if we look from his perspective, everything is already clear, and from our perspective, we don't know.
mm,
But God taught us in the Quran which people will go to hell and which will go to heaven. For example, if someone does idol worship for the rest of his life and like he doesn't repent, that person is gonna go to hell. Can we say this for certain, with certainty, like 100% sure, if that person does that and you are witnessing that person doing this idol worship over and over again,
mm,
even if that person doesn't know that, right? Even if he thinks he's doing righteous and he's doing the things right, following hadith and praying the way how he's doing, but a good person has a children, wife, doesn't steal, doesn't lie, helps the poor, um, is not a bad person, let's say, but still not praying the way how God taught him to pray and all that stuff. Uh, like from my point of view, I thought we can definitely say if that person like keeps doing the idol worship, he is not gonna make it to heaven. He's definitely going to hell, even if we would think that that person is a good person, right? Because if that person is a good person, God would guide him towards the truth, and he wouldn't pray in that manner. What do you think about that, brother?
yeah, mashallah, it's a good question. So, like, of course, I will say that if a person is doing all these things, like, I will say that yes, if he keeps doing them, he ends up doing that, naturally he's gonna go to hell, right? Um, and then also, but also, then I have to make a decision in terms of whether there is hope for that person or not, right? If this person is examining the truth, or if this person has decided to close the case on submission, let's say, right? So if that's the case, then there's no hope for that person. So then I can say with certainty that yeah, this person is going to go to hell because I don't see any hope for this person. This person is an idol worshiper, and he's going to go to hell. I mean, it's possible there may be a slight chance, let's say, that someone we may not have hope for ends up, we don't see it coming and they end up becoming a submitter, right? But then that's not our up to us, right? As far as we're concerned, we're supposed to make a decision on that, because God tells us to befriend certain people and not befriend certain people, and God has given us the knowledge to choose between good and bad and right and wrong, and hypocrite and idol worshiper, right? So there's nothing wrong with us making that decision for ourselves. But one thing people have to remember, though, is like, I mean, obviously, we can't be impatient in making that decision. We have to be absolutely careful. Sometimes people do, people can kind of rush to conclusions too, you know, but it turns out that, the person just maybe needed some more time, or the person really needs to um, be properly introduced to submission. Like, I've seen certain cases before, where people have closed the door on submission on certain people, but really, when you look at it, like, that should not have been the case, But
Yeah, and what about like the at this point there are like around 8 billion people in this world, right? And let's say you have 2 billion people who call themselves Muslims. Like, is it fair to say that if these people who call themselves Muslims, if they keep living like how they live and practicing their religion the way they do, can we say that also according to the verse in the Quran, chapter Yusuf, where God says in 103, no matter what you do, most of the people will not believe, and in 106 he says most of the believers they will do that only by doing idol worship. Based on this, can we say most of these people they're eventually going to end up in hell?
yeah, of course, the Quran says that, right? So we can say what the
So,
Quran is already telling us.
like, From the 8 billion people, most of them, we
Majority,
can
yeah,
say,
of
okay.
course. God says the majority of people are going to hell.
Can we back that up a little bit more, brother? Like, because you have these people
Uh-huh.
who are not bad people, right? They're like, as my in the example I gave, they're
Mm-hmm.
just praying. They're just good people working. They have their families, not
Mm-hmm.
stealing, trying to be honest.
So
At
the thing
least,
is, yeah. So
that people.
yeah, yeah. So the thing is to back that up. I mean, obviously, quote unquote, good people and bad people are based on our um, explanation of what we consider good and bad, right? But the thing is, we have to understand that, first of all, why are we here in this world? It's not about really about like good and bad as much as it is about like worshiping God alone and idol worshiping, right? Versus idol worshiping. So if people are worshiping idols, they're nullifying anything good that they're doing in the first place because it doesn't even count at that point, right? So they're doing all these things, but it's not even going to count if they're idol worshippers. So they can be the best people, they like Mother Teresa or whatever, you know. I mean, considering you consider Mother Teresa to be a good person, uh, right? Um, they can be as good as Mother Teresa, or or I don't know. Some people consider Bill Gates in the same category, but regardless, I mean, someone can be the most charitable person and most nicest person, a smile on their face, whatever you consider as nice, and vegetarian. I don't know if that helps. Doesn't
Maybe.
hurt animals. Yeah.
And what about the people who like live today? They don't heard about the 19 and Rashad. What about them? Can we say that, if they, because when you look at what the messenger said, right, about the Quran, he said basically that the people, they didn't deserve the Quran, right? It was because they did these bad things, and it took like 1400 years to have the Quran, which is like the Quran meant for the rest of the world until the end of the world, right?
Mm-hmm.
And the messenger said they didn't deserve it. They didn't deserve the right Quran. So, based on that, can we say that if today there are people who didn't heard about 19 and who didn't know, heard about Dr. Rashad, the Muslims or the non-Muslims, um, and they die, right, not knowing about 19 and Rashad, can we say that they didn't deserve to know it, and and they will also go to hell,
Well, some
or
people, yeah, of course. I mean, there's people that don't deserve to know it, but there could be other scenarios too, right? I mean, some people, God has, I mean, different scenarios, right? Not deserving is one of them, right? But it's not the only reason that I can say that everybody who didn't hear didn't deserve it. But of course, we know that if anybody deserves anything, they get it, right? So in that sense, it's true. But the reason why they didn't get it, that's not the to me, like, I don't wouldn't say that that's the only reason that they didn't get it is because they didn't deserve it. um in that sense, I mean, there could be many reasons. God, let's say someone has to die before the age of 40. God knows, right? I mean, it's hard for me to draw that conclusion, like hard and square, and so I don't know if I just made up this expression. I don't. There's hard and fast and fair and square. Okay, so what I was saying was that when it comes to judging people, whether they have not heard of Rashad or the message, right? It doesn't make them in like they can still be held accountable for their idol worship, right? Because worshiping God alone is a natural instinct. So in a way, if they didn't deserve to hear the message, in that sense, they God also knows there's certain people that it's not going to make a difference, even if they knew the message, that they're not going to follow it either, right? There's many people who are here in this world, they see the message, um, but they don't care, right? So there's many people like that, and obviously for those people, it doesn't make a difference if they heard it or not. They still were not going to be believers. They have the basic commandments, the basic instinct to worship God alone. They still don't follow that, right? So it's not really a
So
big.
what will happen to them?
Yeah, I mean, of course, if they're idol worshippers, all their works are going to be nullified, right? Because they didn't. Anybody who comes here in this world, they're going to be judged on whether they're idol worshippers or monotheists. If they're idol worshippers, all their works are going to be nullified. Only
Yeah,
people
let's
who
say,
only time you will be judged, like based on your actions, is when you have things to be judged on. Like if all your good deeds are wiped out, there's nothing for you to be judged on, right? You're just going to hell. But for someone who
mm,
worships God alone, then you have to look at, okay, how much you have in your account in that sense, right?
yeah.
I mean, how many sins you did, how many good deeds you did. Based on that, you're going to heaven or not. But for people who are idol worshippers, I mean, they're already in Satan's um,
Yeah, like I have a
side, you know.
specific one. Let's say there is this guy who is, as far as we can see, a good person. He is a Muslim, but he's not a traditional Muslim. He doesn't believe in, he doesn't go to the mosques. He doesn't believe in the hadith. The only difference between us and him is like we have more information because we know Rashad and we know the new message and 19, right? But this other person, he didn't heard about Rashad, he didn't heard about 19. But this guy was like someone who criticized the Muslims, criticized the mosque, the way, like also the hadith, etc. Um, like we have difficulty believing that this person is going to hell since he is like doing almost everything as what we do, believe in one God, follow
He's not
only
an
the
idol
Quran.
worshiper, you're saying?
Yeah, and he's basically not really an idol worshiper because he doesn't follow the hadith, he doesn't go to the mosques. He always criticized them,
Does he
by
mention Muhammad in
saying,
his prayer?
sorry.
Would he mention Muhammad in his prayer?
Oh, that I don't know.
Yeah, so if he
I
does
am not
mention Muhammad
sure.
in his prayer, then he's idol worshipping, right?
Maybe he doesn't, I don't know. But if it's also possible he does, that's something
They
that we
all
don't know.
do. I mean, they
Yeah.
all do.
Yeah, some of them don't, right? Because the messenger also talks about certain
No, there's
people.
nobody who doesn't mention
N-
Muhammad in their prayer unless they're submitters.
Yeah, yeah, I know, but the messenger was speaking about a group of people whom he knew. For example, he gives this example with chapter 9, the 28th and 29th, knowing that there is something wrong with that verse and it doesn't fit in with the rest of the Quran, right?
Uh huh.
Even before the message came, he said, like, you remember that? What he said?
I don't know the context, but go on.
Oh, okay. So, based on that, like, I'm not sure if he does do that in his prayers. Also, for example, the mother of the messenger, like, he also told us that his mother, even before the message came, she said, like, these people, they are doing it wrong. They are mentioning Muhammad and praying to him, etc. While his mother didn't do that, right? Without receiving, like, before the message came.
So,
So,
yeah, so I mean, after the message came, his mother was a submitter, right?
yeah, yeah, yeah.
So, yeah, so then she changed. But
Yeah, that's
we're
right. But
talking about,
if she died before the message, probably she still would go to heaven, right? Because of how she was.
I mean, we're discussing too many hypothetical scenarios here, right? So, I
Okay.
mean, I I would just say that God knows everybody and what they're doing, and if they're committing idol worship, if it's they're mentioning other names besides God, they're gonna go to hell, right? Because idol
Hmm.
worship is an unforgivable offense if maintained until death, and if anybody, is a true submitter to God, they would not mention any other names besides God. So because not because monotheism is a natural instinct that was given to all of us. So just because somebody didn't come to you and give you this information specifically, that's not going to be an excuse on the day of judgment, right? Having said that, there's people in this world that may not have the message, will have never come across the message, but they're righteous people. But those aren't the people who are mentioning idols. There are people who are doing good and
Hmm.
everything, but they're not mentioning idols in their prayers and stuff, right? They could be submitters in Christianity, Buddhism, wherever, right? But they wouldn't be
Hmm.
doing any kind of idol worship. They'll always be against it. Like there could be Christians, for example, that always believed, that were born in Christian families, that always believed in God and never thought Jesus was God, right? They never got the
Hmm.
message, and then they died, right? God could
Oh yeah.
forgive those people because they never worshiped idols and they tried to live
Hmm.
a good life. But let's say a person who's a Muslim and is doing his daily prayers and is mentioning Ibrahim and Muhammad in their prayers, you know, it's
Oh, but they don't. Okay, I see they don't because they believe that at-tahiyatu is not from the Quran, so they are not reciting that. So anything that's not of the Quran. But then the question
no, I'm not
comes
talking about
like,
Tayyat even. I'm talking about the salawat that they sent to Muhammad and Abraham, right after that,
yeah,
and the Shahada
yeah, yeah,
is
that I'm not
also
sure.
adding Muhammad's name next to God in Shahada in the
Hmm.
prayer. They all do that, right?
Or even reading verses from the Quran where the other people's name come, right? Or the
Yeah, I
the
mean,
prophet's
yeah,
name come.
that part, yeah, but I mean, you could still argue about that, right? But when they're clearly praising Muhammad and clearly praising Abraham, and making a distinction among the messengers, and adding a name next to God, that's just idol worship by action. So they're just proving their idol worship. There's no reason to believe that they're not idol worshiping, because with the act that they're doing confirms their idol worship. Like it's so easy. If you say, like we have the example from the message of the covenant, right? If you say, "Oh, geez," and your intention is not to worship Jesus, you're a submitter, and you say, "Oh, geez," Satan's going to make a claim that you're an idol worshiper, you're commemorating Jesus, and the messenger says his claim will be granted. So, what makes us think that someone's going to mention Muhammad and Abraham in their prayers and they're not going to be claimed by Satan as idol worshippers, right? That's just wishful thinking at that point. But yeah, I mean, the messenger's mother is a different case in the sense that she was not an idol worshiper. Eventually, God saved her. She became a submitter, and I believe she changed her prayers. So she went to heaven, right? But if people are mentioning other names besides God, but they're they have issues with other things, like the Quranists have issues with other things, right? But that doesn't make them like bound for paradise because of other things, right? So in the same way, I mean, if people are clearly committing idol worship with their actions, like adding Muhammad's name next to God in Shahada, they're claimed by Satan as idol worshippers, and the claim is going to be granted because we all have the natural instinct given to us by God to worship God alone or not. So that whether we have the messenger or the message or not, but the people who are going to heaven who don't have the message are the people who were never idol worshippers or who were not idol worshippers at least until death, right?
Hmm. Yeah, yeah. What about like finding it very difficult to believe that so many souls, so many people are gonna go to hell? Like, for some people, it can be very
Quran
difficult
says
to.
Quran says that I mean if they're finding it hard, that's too bad for them. They're finding it
Yeah, the
hard to
Quran
believe
is
the Quran,
clear. Yeah, there's a verse in the Quran where God says, that believers they hear and they obey.
hmm
Like if God says most of the people, whatever you do, they're not gonna
hmm
believe, yeah, then
hmm
that's it, right? It's
Yeah,
very
and also,
simple.
yeah, exactly. And also, the thing is that when we say a lot of people, we have to understand that how many people are with God. I mean, yes, we're in Satan's domain, so all the people here, it looks like there's a lot of people that are going to hell, that most people are going to hell. But if you look at, for example, the number of angels, or the number of animals, or the number of bacteria, or the number of stars, I mean, all these are submitters, right? So these people are in very small numbers that we are going to hell in that sense, but the majority of humans are because they're rebels, right? And that's why they deserve to pay for it. Those who don't,
Yeah.
you know,
Yeah, the
turn out
messenger
to be
says they're
Muslims.
like hardcore
Mm-hmm.
rebels that when you see them in the hereafter running towards hell,
Mm-hmm.
they really deserve it because they themselves, and we read from 32, chapter 32, verse 13, I believe, the footnote. It
Mm-hmm.
says that, God doesn't put even one soul in hell. It's,
Mm-hmm.
everyone themselves, like everyone is running towards hell themselves. It's not God putting them there, actually.
Yeah.
So actually, even asking the question, why are so many people, why are they going to hell? As if it is God's choice to put them in hell.
Mm-hmm.
God actually, if it was for the angels, even the ones who didn't deserve to go to hell would go to hell if it was for the angels, right? So
Yeah.
God saved basically all these souls
Mm-hmm.
from going to hell, and still, yeah, like what is left, the messenger says these are really the hardcore unbelievers, idol worshippers who are, running towards hell themselves.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And God sends messengers, he sends books, right? He is,
Mm-hmm.
divinely guiding and helping, but if you insist on not receiving that, yeah, then what else is there to do? And of
Mm-hmm.
course, the other thing is God says, um, they will ask, send us back to earth, and then we will do right.
Mm-hmm.
But even if he will send them 1,000 times, they still wouldn't do the right thing.
Right. Yeah. That's true.
Yeah. So
Um.
what does he need to do? Like create 1,000 times on earth and create over and over again, send over and over again messengers, like the same messengers again and again, while in
Mm-hmm.
the end they still not going to believe,
Yeah.
right? So okay, mashallah.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you, brother, for the answers.
Yeah. You're welcome. Man. Yeah. Mashallah. So, brother Khalid, I think also shared a verse 28:59. It says, "For your Lord never annihilates any community without sending a messenger in the midst thereof to recite our revelations to them. We never annihilate any community unless its people are wicked." So I think this was in reference to people being annihilated. Brother Khalid, I think. Hmm. So I guess if there are no other comments or questions in relation to the verses we read, um, we can just go off topic.
Yeah, brother, like I would definitely want to put some time and some thoughts, some remindings about the topic of circumcision.
Mm-hmm.
Like, can we do a summary, talk about it, look at the evidences?
Mm-hmm.
I would like to start with a question,
Mm-hmm.
if you don't mind, brother.
Yeah.
So, there are, of course, a few different types of reasons why people who, accept circumcision,
Mm-hmm.
why they accept it, and the reasons that they give, basically.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and I want to place this in two categories.
Mm-hmm.
One is the group that accepts circumcision as if it's a commandment of God,
Mm-hmm.
similar to commandments like 5 times prayer, zakat, hajj,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
and fasting, similarly as that. And they come up with so-called evidences that Abraham, of course, is the father of submission. It is given to him. In the Quran, God says that we need to accept previous scriptures, And if we look at those previous scriptures, we can read from the Torah. I don't know the chapter and verse number exactly, but there it says to Abraham that he needs to do circumcision himself, his sons, even his servants
Mm-hmm.
and families, based on the covenant that he made with God.
Mm-hmm.
That is the one category. The other category is actually a new category, people who they don't
Mm-hmm.
accept circumcision as a part of religion. They say, well, this is not the same as 5 times prayer, zakat, hajj, or fasting. This is something which is mentioned in Torah, in the Bible.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but because it isn't mentioned in the Quran similarly as the other commandments, we don't accept it as the same as the other commandments. But
Yeah, it is
we
not a
still
new
believe.
category. It is not the new
Sorry?
category. That is the old category. The new category
Okay.
is the people. The new category was the people who said that it's mandatory part of the practices, right? That was the
Yeah,
first.
mandatory.
Yeah,
You're
that's
right.
the newer. That's the newer category. So
Oh,
like
is that the
this.
newer category? Oh, okay.
Yeah,
Like, you know the reason why
because
I'm asking
yeah, yeah,
the other way, but
because of the Turkish people and stuff. So the thing is, this was introduced first by Master Tucson, right?
brother,
Abdullah
can
Eric.
I, Suleiman,
So
Suleiman,
let's just say,
brother,
yeah, yeah, go ahead.
brother, I want to add something and finish the question, and
Sure,
then
sure, sure.
like it would be amazing if you can answer
Okay,
totally,
okay,
because
okay,
there was a specific thing that I wanted to ask,
okay,
like
okay.
point out in the question.
All
Okay,
right.
so um, um, so the reason, and then the old version, let's say. Is that they say it is not part of religion, but this is a covenant made between God and Abraham and his people. We accept what is written in the Torah based on the circumcision, etc. It is not part of religion. And if someone wants to do it, we will not tell them don't do it, because there nowhere in the Quran mentioned God anything about circumcision, and the messenger also didn't mention it. And if it was wrong to do it, then we would have a verse in the Quran, God telling us, don't do this, this is wrong. Or the messenger would have said to us, listen, this is wrong, and here are the evidences from the Quran. This didn't happen. We can't find any of this. That's the reason why we can say that circumcision is not prohibited. And if someone wants to do it based on their culture or based on some other reasons, we
Mm-hmm.
cannot say that it's wrong, so they can do it. We'll just neutral in that. This is the basically the question, brother.
So what's the question? And the question?
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, so how do we need to look into that? Their arguments, saying that circumcision, we know God did
So
it's not a commandment from
yeah,
God,
yeah.
but there
Mm-hmm.
is no verse where God doesn't say.
Yeah. So when people say that, excuse me, when people say that they're in the culture or whatever, I mean, they're following their parents blindly.
Wrong
God
in
says,
religion, right? To
yeah,
correct it.
God says we have to examine all inherited traditions. Can you guys hear me? I think my reception just dropped.
Yes, brother. Yes,
Okay,
I can hear you.
right. So they're following their parents blindly, and God says examine all inherited traditions. And when they say it's not part of the religion, but it was given to Abraham, then you're saying it's a part of religion, but you're just saying it's not mandatory because it's not in the Quran. So that is essentially how the idea was introduced into submission by Abdullah Eric, right, from Masjid Tucson. And then the ex-Shia people from San Jose, basically made it a part of the religion in the sense of mandatory, right? Because in Shia religion, it's mandatory. And Abdullah Eric came from Sunni background. In Sunni background, it's optional, even though it's done by everybody. It's a sunnah, which means that they consider it optional, right? And same as Turkish, right? Even though every Turk might be doing it, it's not mandatory, but in Shia religion, it's mandatory. And so this is just what we're seeing is just basically a Shia version and a Sunni version of circumcision. The people who came from a Shia background are saying it's mandatory, and the people who came from a Sunni background are saying it's not mandatory. Ironically, okay, and so whether they're Shia or they're Sunni, uh, uh, you know, what they're doing is idol worship. So, yeah, so it is. You know, it's funny because in Pakistan, it is called Sunnah. Like circumcision is called Sunnah. You know, like if you want to ask,
Also in Turkey.
yeah, also in Turkey, right? In it says Sunnat, right? So same thing, right? And so, and the reason is that it is found in Hadith and Sunnah, right? For Muslims, right? Because obviously Muslims don't have anything to do with the Torah. They don't ever read the Bible. So their source is the Sunnah, Hadith and Sunnah. So for these people who say, oh, like, they have no excuse with God. I mean, they can say whatever they want, right? Anybody can lie as much as they want. But the thing is, they have no argument with at God because it's part of the Sunnah. And the Messenger of the Covenant, even though they say Messenger of the Covenant never said it, Messenger of the Covenant did not name every Hadith and Sunnah practice and say it's prohibited. And then once he didn't specifically name, you can do it, right? There's hundreds of them, right? And he's disbelievers in the past when they justify their idol worship, right? But we can just simply tell them, really, I mean, there's not much to argue with these people. I mean, you can simply tell them, our religion, as what the messenger said, you know, is follow what is in the Quran. If it's not in the Quran, we don't follow, right? And the way it's corrected is, you know, God gives you the real truth, the accurate history based on which you can tell which version is correct and which version is false. So the stupid people, I mean, I wish, I mean, I could, describe them in a better way, but who say that it's in the Torah, like it's very simple, right? God says in the Quran that God gave what God gave to Abraham, right? You look at the Bible, there's no mention of what God gave to Abraham except circumcision. And the whole covenant is twisted, and what was given to Abraham, and they have just changed it to circumcision, right? So any sane, sincere submitter who reads the Quran and sees the Torah uh, in that sense should be able to tell, okay, clearly the Bible is corrupted in that part because it doesn't mention the Salat or Zakat or fasting or Hajj, right? And it mentions this. Now, whether you call it a covenant or a practice, it doesn't change the fact that you're saying something was given to Abraham that was part of his religion, but it's not part of your religion. That is just stupid because we're all supposed to follow the religion of Abraham, right? So this is very ignorant and satanic and evil of these people to fabricate these. No, but the Quran doesn't say that, right? But then when it comes to circumcision, then they're all of a sudden they are just unable to read anything or understand anything. But it's very
So the
clear.
Quran doesn't correct that verse, right? That's what you're saying.
It doesn't, right? It doesn't say that
Yeah, not
that Lot,
directly. Not directly, right?
of course, it doesn't say that Lot never
Yeah.
drank. I mean, and it's not going to, right? It's going to be funny. It's God that open a surah and God says that Lot never drank and didn't have sex with his two daughters, and there's so many others, right? But
Mm-hmm.
that's not how the Quran presents the truth,
Mm-hmm.
right? The Quran tells you the right story. Like there's contradicting stuff about Abraham and other messengers, names, and so many things are conflicted. But the Quran gives you the accurate history and the right account, and automatically you compare the two and you understand, okay, this is the truth, this is
Mm-hmm.
falsehood. And so by that definition, obviously Quran is not going to overlook this fact People have attributed lies to God. God says no. Abraham made this covenant. This is what was said. Now look at the detail in which God has described these interactions between Abraham and his angels, right? So why wouldn't the Quran say anything about circumcision? Like they don't look at it like that, right? If like you ask them, okay, if circumcision was a part of religion and was something that was given to our father in submission, that we call him in submission, like the founder of submission, I mean, um, uh, why didn't God mention it in the Quran, right? But they don't have an. Aren't we supposed to follow the Quran alone? What happened to following the Quran alone? Like they claim they follow the Quran alone, right? But what happens now to the Quran alone when they believe in things that they can't prove? I mean, it's very simple, right? We don't even have to
Yeah,
complicate it. We don't even have to make it like rocket science. Um, and the more we complicate it, like these arguments, the more difficult it is for other people, and it's more confusing for them, right? But we also have to keep it simple, stick to the simple things that, we are following the Quran alone. You can call us Quranists, you can call us whatever you want, but we simply follow what is in the Quran. The messenger says this is our principle. If it's not in the Quran, we don't accept it, right? And so they can say, no,
yeah.
no,
So
the messenger didn't say this, the messenger didn't say that. Let them say whatever they want, you know? We can just tell them, you just want to go by what the messenger said and forget about what the Quran says. That if it's not in the Quran, we don't accept it. God says follow the Quran alone. The messenger says follow the Quran alone. Then why are you following other things? And what's wrong with telling people follow the Quran alone? That this is not in the Quran. We follow what is in the Quran, right? That's the message. So there's hypocrites.
Also,
Yeah.
yeah, so they say it is
No, they say
because it's
they say it is
culture or
from
because
religion.
this and that.
No, they say it
brothers,
is.
can I
They
say?
yeah. They say it is from religion. When they say it's Abraham, it's automatically from religion. But they say it's not a commandment. They say it's not just by them flipping a category and saying it's not a practice because then it goes against them. They're trying to get around being blamed for adding another practice. So you can clearly show them all the practices by number 1, 2, 3, 4. They say no, it's not a practice, but it's a covenant. What is a covenant? A covenant for what? Covenant to do something. Doing something is a practice, right? Isn't it? You said no, I made an agreement with you, but I'm not doing business with you. But I made a business agreement. You made an agreement to do something, to do business with me, but I can't say you're doing business with me. You're just doing an agreement. That doesn't even make any sense, does it? Right? So Abraham made a covenant. They say, but it's not a practice. How does that how does that make any difference? That's just they're just playing games, brother. And eventually,
Also,
I mean, people who are supposed to believe, they are going to believe. Yeah, go ahead, brother.
okay. Also, brother, like you pointed out, God sent a messenger, the messenger of the covenant, and how you pointed out that he says it clearly that I actually never thought of it this way until you just said it right now. He said that the hadiths are innovations,
Mm-hmm.
and that's in the hadith. So automatically, that exposes that if you
Mm-hmm.
see it that way.
Yeah, and they said, don't tell people that it's satanic. Well, the messenger of the covenant and the Quran was already saying all hadith and sunnah are satanic innovations, right? It is from hadith and sunnah. Like, where are the Muslims following circumcision, right? Do they ever follow the Bible? No, they go by hadith and sunnah, right? That's all they go by. You look in the hadiths. There's so many hadiths about circumcision, and then, but what's so funny is that there's no evidence. Hadiths can be used as a historical reference, right? We know that from the messenger. And there's no reference of Muhammad ever being circumcised. How ironic is that? Muhammad wasn't following the religion of Abraham, imagine. And these people are following the religion of Abraham by practicing circumcision. Muhammad was not circumcised. You know that. There's no evidence in history of hadith and sunnah that Muhammad was ever circumcised. In fact, they accept they agree that Muhammad was never circumcised because they have hadith that says Muhammad was born circumcised.
Yeah,
But
he
they
was
still
born like
follow
that
all
way.
these lies.
Okay, so and then what about the case where you would say, you use ear piercings, so you cut a part of your ear to be able to use them? I know it grows back if it's just your ear, but what if you
Right.
compare this with circumcision?
Well, ear piercings are not this. It's not mutilation because it comes back, right? It's like just like you had a cut or something. It grows back, right? But when what we're talking about is mutilation. It's permanent. It doesn't grow back. Even if you try to grow the foreskin back, it's not gonna come back. Like you're gonna have dead skin cell. You're gonna have skin cells that are just skin cells. You're never gonna get those nerves endings and all the structures that God has created that makes it something of use. You know, it's gonna like you can stretch the skin, but it's not gonna have all this infrastructure that God created. So it doesn't ever come back, right? But you can't compare it to cutting nails because nails grow back, or hair, the hair grow back. You can compare it to something like cutting off your breast, or cutting off, amputating your leg or your finger, or cutting off your ear, or chopping a part of your nose, because those things don't grow back, right? Those are more accurate uh, uh, comparisons, which we know is a
Yeah,
sin. You
mashallah.
can't do it to another person with against their will, right? So it is a
Yeah,
sin.
yeah,
I've,
of
I've,
course, there's also that
Any
part, right?
yeah, huh?
Yeah, so you have also that part with circumcision, that you are doing something to a child
Yeah,
which cannot protect himself
yeah.
from you, and it's his body, and you are making decisions
Mm-hmm.
based on his body. And it's not like something that it is really needed. Like if the doctor would say, you definitely need to cut off his hand, a
Mm-hmm.
child, newborn hand, or else he's gonna
Mm-hmm.
die, it's,
Then
then
you can
of
cut it
course you
off,
would do
yeah.
that. But yeah.
Yeah, but you were preemptively cutting off somebody's arm because you're afraid that their arm might get cancer or some
Hmm.
infection. I mean, in this case, it's so funny because you're cutting. Imagine you're cutting off a person's arm because it's not like people getting a sinus infection. You know, a UTI is like 0.001% chance that someone might even ever get those, right? It's not, and I mean I don't know the exact percentage, but it's not something that is a frequent thing even. You know, you have millions of people in countries like India and China and stuff where nobody's circumcised and they don't have any issues. And they're clean, hygienic people, and they're fine. Everybody's fine. But obviously, what happens to trusting in God? Imagine when you're afraid that you're gonna get an infection that you cut something off. That doesn't even make any sense logically, right? Or what kind of lifestyle are you living where you're afraid that you're gonna get AIDS, that this is gonna protect you against AIDS? You know, I mean, if you follow God's commandments, you're not even going to get anything like that, right? Obviously, you're going to be a submitter. You're not going to have homosexuality. And then they say, no, just cut it off because it's going to reduce your. That's even nonsense. It's not even science, real science, to think that this will protect you against it. They just did these bias studies to fool people, and they were fooled by that. But there's no evidence, real evidence, scientific, logical evidence that backs up this study. It was a bogus study.
yeah, I think the medical point is very, very important, and it's getting missed out that there's no really any medical need for circumcision one.
Mm-hmm.
And two, you're actually, and more important than that, is that you're causing uh, physical mutilation for the body
Mm-hmm.
by cutting off something which is there's a purpose for that part. It's not even
Mm-hmm.
unnecessary. It is necessary.
Yeah.
There for protection.
Yeah.
And
Protection and
this,
so many
when
other
you remove
things.
it, and sorry,
I mean, protection and so many other things, you know? Like, for example, people who get circumcised, you know, it's a big part of your organ in the sense of, you know, sensation and everything else, right? So people who have issues like, you know, ED and all these other marital issues, you know, they all manifest themselves at a later age, you know, when you need them more, because eventually, you know, as we grow older, our cells die off and stuff, right? And you know, but you know, these things are measured precisely for a reason that God has given us. So when they're not there, I mean, yeah, you may not notice anything when you're 16 or 18 or 20 or even 40, right? But as you grow older, you know, you begin to realize that you are having a lot of problems, you know, as a result of that, you know.
yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So I guess this is a very strong. Um, yes, we can tell them that you only follow the Quran. You don't follow anything other than the Word of God. But you have to use also. You have to back it up with science. I
Mm-hmm.
mean, yes, they would shy away from it. You get the medical world might sponsor the idea of circumcision. But at
Mm-hmm.
the same time, you have some who are who talks against it openly, just like in the video that we shared before.
Mm-hmm.
This should be translated to different languages to help with
Mm-hmm.
explaining to others, like the
Mm-hmm.
Turkish community, who are debating this. Maybe if they see this video, explain to them in their language,
Mm-hmm.
they probably would. It would make more sense to them than me, myself, yourself, or the other brother talking, trying to explain the idea.
Mm-hmm.
Give them something to like
Mm-hmm.
build upon,
Yeah, like
something
have that
solid.
video translated in Turkish. Yeah.
Yes, I think
Yeah.
it will be very helpful if it get translated.
Yes,
So
so
Yeah, but I
there are
think
some
YouTube can do it
the
automatically, right?
yeah, so actually there are some, who also speak English. So it's not basically about okay,
Yeah,
what is the reason
exactly.
of this and that?
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, no, I agree. I agree. These are good points, mashallah. Especially the medical ones. Like, I think it's important because when you have someone like that, you know, saying I'm a doctor and it's God knows what else garbage, I mean, is being presented. So it's good to have, you know, that part covered as well. I gave a sermon also on the medical aspect of this one at one of my videos, which is I guess a shorter version of the things that were described in the video. Um, so maybe we could translate that part. Um, yeah, the so-called doctors with their experience qualifications.
Yeah, I was planning to do that, brother. Like
Uh-huh.
to look into that and then translate and then summarize a lot of things.
Uh-huh.
And definitely that's gonna help, inshallah.
Inshallah,
I
yeah.
I mean, it will help. It's
Yeah.
not
Mm-hmm.
enough. There's lots of people who are still going to not follow it, but at least
Mm-hmm.
say if you have like 100 people listening to it, you might convince 20% of these people. That's
Mm-hmm.
good enough. It's still
Mm-hmm.
convince
Yeah,
some
there was
people is
only
better than
yeah,
Mm-hmm.
there was only one brother
Mm-hmm.
who was convinced like within two
Mm-hmm.
days. He was already convinced and he said, "Oh, this
Mm-hmm.
is amazing." So even that is like a huge win.
Mm-hmm.
So
Exactly.
of course. MashaAllah,
and
you
and
should,
there
yeah.
are more and there are more like people who don't really who just are new to submission, but how the devil is. He's like very he's trying to trick new submitters into
Mm-hmm.
this trap of him because he can't use the other things. People, they just don't believe in the hadith and that kind of stuff, and they believe in Rashad, they believe in 19, but then you come to circumcision. Like, it's very strange, but it is
Mm-hmm.
there. And a lot of people who call themselves submitters, for a very long time, even they also are being trapped in this way by the devil.
Yeah, I mean everything happens really in accordance with God's will, and I guess it's just a way to for these people to be exposed.
Yeah,
Right. This
subhanAllah.
is also a way for exposing those, right? Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
It's true, brother Jeffrey, what you said, it's satanic and you can't go no other way. There's no other way around it. It's just simply satanic, there's no good in it. And when these people are doing this, you know, they're falling into Satan's trap.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, thank God for the clear truth that we have. I mean, we have the Quran, we have the principle. Anybody who's not clear on the Quranic principle, that we have to follow Quran alone, they're Satan's game, right? God says the moment that they decide to uphold any other source besides the Quran as a source of religious guidance, right? I mean, it doesn't have to be a mandatory or not. You're taking any other source besides the Quran as a source of religious guidance. We don't have anything in the Quran to back this up. They're using other sources besides the Quran as a source of religious guidance. So just they are being trapped by Satan. You know, that's the only thing we're being decided on. We're being tested whether we're going to hold the Quran alone or not. And these people are failing miserably because they choose to uphold these sources. But I don't. But it's a simple thing, right? It's not complicated, right? Very simple.
Yeah, I had this one other guy,
Mm-hmm.
when I was talking about these topics, and I was telling him, like, listen, everything is very clear and simple, and it's like this and that, but and then like he was against that. He was against being things simple and open
Mm-hmm.
and clear.
Mm-hmm.
So even that's a problem for a lot of people, accepting that
Mm-hmm.
it is actually very simple. We
Yeah.
don't have to make a huge big thing out of it, right?
Mm-hmm.
And that's also the thing what the devil likes. He likes making things complicated.
Mm-hmm.
We can see this simply in the example of when God tells them to sacrifice a heifer,
Mm-hmm.
you know, instead of just taking one heifer and then sacrificing them, they're asking, okay,
Mm-hmm.
we don't understand this and that, and making it more
Mm-hmm.
difficult for themselves.
Yeah. Yeah,
It's
and that
devil's
actually
work.
repels people. That does repels people. Like, and it discourages them from even learning about it. When you put them in a complicated situation, like, oh, they have to analyze this and analyze that and read this book and that book, and read these lengthy articles written by people uh, that are debating it. um, I mean, you just simply present to them the fact that okay, you're a submitter. Are you going to follow Quran alone or not? you know so if you're going to follow Quran alone, then you can't rely on anything else. you know it's that's all it is, right? And the messenger says it may or may not be correct. But if it's not in the Quran, we're not going to accept it. We don't care for it. We're not going to accept it. That's our principle. That's very simple. He says.
Yeah, mashallah. It took them like so many years, brother,
Mm-hmm.
to understand that when they were accepting circumcision as a part of religion, similar to five times prayer, the zakat, hajj, etc., uh, that it was like a surprise for them. Oh, like God doesn't mention circumcision here. He's mentioning the salat, zakat, hajj, and fasting, but he doesn't mention circumcision. So you can clearly see after reading so many times the Quran or trying to translate it or following or knowing about all these videos, still they are so blind to see this fact. Like it took them so many years to see that.
Yeah, I mean, the way I see it is that one, they were following this other group, right? in San Jose, and that's what they believed. And then eventually they were disillusioned by them because they were rejected. They rejected their idea about the food and meat, right? So then they went back to the Masjid Tucson version. This is nothing the same old first Masjid Tucson idea, and but it's not a development, right? I told you, like it's not like progress. It's just yeah, it's just like someone's worshiping Muhammad and then they start worshiping Jesus, or someone's worshiping Jesus and then they go and start worshiping Mary or something like that. They're no better than the other. Like they didn't make any progress. You know.
Yeah. Eventually they didn't. So nothing changed actually. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, but I mean, really, um, I mean, God bless all the people who are striving for this and making effort, mashallah, like you. And the thing is that it's it's um, gonna be heard by people who are destined to accept it, who are sincere. But people obviously who have made up their minds. I mean, you can you can write 10 books and write all the logical reasonings behind it, but the fact that these people have decided to uphold other sources besides the Quran, they are actually like in a very strange, but in a very sort of a literal way. These people are actually blocked. God says He places barriers in front of them and barriers behind them. Thus, when you preach God alone using the Quran, you preach God using the Quran alone, they run away in aversion. So they fall in that same category. And really, we can't see those barriers, but literally, there are barriers in front of them and behind them that blocks them in their positions. That they're sealed from getting any guidance. I mean, it's so serious. Um, but these people are just blocked. So it doesn't matter what you show to them, whether it's scientific or non-scientific. From whatever angle you approach them, they're completely blinded. You know. A lot of it has to do with the
Thank you,
ego.
brother.
You know, the egotistical people, and God knows that. That's why. Because if they were sincere worshippers of God alone, they would be able to see the truth.
There's also this thing that people just don't accept the truth because the truth comes from someone whom
They don't like.
they don't like. Yeah. Like you can even see like examples in the Quran about this, about the
Yeah.
messengers, them not liking that person. They're
Mm-hmm.
saying, why isn't a person
Yeah.
which is like rich and has everything,
Yeah.
or someone from our own, and that kind of stuff.
Yeah. But I
So
mean, it's
uh,
also it's all part of
that
the yeah.
that proves that
Mm-hmm.
it's because of the ego
Yeah. I mean,
why they
they
don't
they
believe it.
wouldn't have to not like the person in the first place if they didn't have that ego. There was something about
Yeah.
there was something about the person or people, that causes them to develop, these kind of aversions, right? In the first place. Like you shouldn't have that against other submitters. Like you would love your brothers and sisters, right? So developing this kind of a thing is is only because they deserve it. I mean, this jealousy factor,
Yeah.
right?
Mm-hmm. Definitely, brother.
Yeah.
Yeah, because like all these feelings that you have,
Mm-hmm.
um, for example, Pharaoh, right? God told Moses to go to him to talk in the best
Mm-hmm.
manner, in the right way.
Mm-hmm.
He gave him so many chances,
Mm-hmm.
but then he just did. It's basically all about this feeling that he has, right?
Mm-hmm.
Thinking that he is
Mm-hmm.
something,
Mm-hmm. And
but he
what
didn't.
he
He didn't let
sees
that go.
exactly in those examples, I can learn from it. Like what he sees in what he sees in Moses is something totally different than what we see. Like he's saying, "Oh well, look at you so ungrateful." Like I'm paraphrasing, right? Look at you so ungrateful. Like we saved you, and we you committed the crime you committed. Like he's talking down on him like he was some most terrible person. Like we
Mm-hmm.
raised you up, we gave you all these things, and then you went and you became a murderer or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
Well, here he is. I mean, God made him a messenger. He came to help him. That was his only chance to be saved. But he preferred to be
Mm-hmm.
doomed. I mean, these people are following the same thing. Like, I mean, those people, the earliest. I mean, it's funny you mentioned it, right? But you can see that people who, like, for example, the Jews who think that it was given to Abraham, or the Muslims. I mean, there are signs that this was being practiced by people of Pharaoh who were not following Judaism, right? And there's archaeological findings about things that they have relics and stuff that are depicting all of these things, that these people were being circumcised. And there's other proofs that point out to the fact that circumcision was being practiced by people like cults way before Abraham. So I mean, they're following just it was like a god of fertility. They would sacrifice this to in among at the time of Pharaoh, based on the history, like what I found, that these people were following, also Jews were following after him. And then these people who came into Islam, they brought it with them also from Judaism, right? And incorporate it into the books of Hadith and stuff. But I mean, obviously, eventually, we know that this is all Satan's plan to, he promised God. I mean, that is another thing. Like, it's so clearly mentioned in the Quran. It says, "I will command them to destroy God's creation." I mean, I promise them and I'll entice them. Covenant is a promise. He made. This is Satan's covenant, and to manipulate people into distorting God's creation, something that is documented in the Quran, right? So if people say, let's say, they say circumcision is not in the Quran, I would say, yeah, it's in the Quran. If you read the verse where Satan says, "I will command them to distort God's creation," that's circumcision. Okay. So thank you, brother. Okay, so I guess if there are no other comments or questions, God willing, we can conclude our study. So thank you all for joining us. God willing, going forward, our Tuesday Quran studies have been moved to Wednesdays at 9:30 a.m. Pacific time every Wednesday, and then our next English Quran study would be on Saturday at 9:30 a.m. Pacific time. And God bless you all. Assalamu alaikum.
God bless you, brother. Thank you for the
Thank you,
study,
mashallah.
mashallah. God
God
bless you all.
bless you. Assalamu alaikum.
God bless you all. Assalamu alaikum.
Salam alaikum.